Zaccharie Risacher got off to an extremely hot start in his first significant minutes in both Pro A and Euro Cup play with JL Bourg, and though he hit a wall in the middle of the year, he's produced at a great rate for his age and is currently playing some of his best basketball of his career and swinging playoff games in the process. At a listed 6'9", 204, he has clear appeal as a big wing shooter who guards multiple positions and is a fluid mover. Now there are big questions in his ability to make plays, the caliber of shooter he is, and just how high you take somebody of his archetype, but he's shown he has the tools to contribute with a defined game and will likely be one of the first handful of names called on draft night. Risacher's clearest NBA skill offensively is his spot-up three-point shooting. As we mentioned, he started off the year red hot, and at the time we did the first look video in December, he was at about 47% through 26 games. Since then, he's taken a dip down to about 34%, but zooming out and accounting for role and opportunity, nearly 39% on 3.5 attempts over the year is pretty substantial, especially when looking at how he's improved over the last couple years and the fact that he stepped back up and made teams pay in time for the playoffs. Now his mechanics aren't the prettiest, but I do think they're workable. He has a compact and quick release up top, he's got solid energy transfer, and he's capable of taking and making a no-dip three. Now the shot prep and footwork is inconsistent and at times all over the place and was often the root for some of his issues, but he's definitely made progress from where it was in years past. He shot over 40% on catch and shoot threes, he has good timing and recognition on shakeups and drifts into the corner and just finding gaps weak side, and he had a few movement flashes on pin downs, flares, and some relocation, and a few other looks that were at least interesting, though the footwork will need to improve to do that in a significant way. I'd hesitate to call him an elite shooting prospect. That's where we need a little bit more consistency, volume, and versatility beyond wide open spot ups, and his free throw shooting doesn't suggest elite either, but I'm pretty confident he's going to space the floor at the NBA level. I buy the improvement rate and think at that size he could certainly continue to grow as a threat here over time.
Zaccharie is fouled.
Risacher non è
Risacher. Voilà. Soit une première défaite à domicile, soit une première défaite à l'extérieur.
Now staying with the offense, Risacher will primarily make an impact as an off-ball threat and play finisher, and a big part of that is being able to cut and move and find gaps for easy looks, which he did a solid job at. I was impressed by his feel and timing here, whether it was a 45 or a corner cut or a simple backdoor. He showed he could read the defense and improvise and use his agility to finish around the rim, and just had a knack for being in the area a lot of times. He also did a good job of executing their sets and stood out on sideline out of bounds looks, especially as an inbounder. Now there were periods I felt like he could be a little bit more active, particularly when he wasn't getting opportunities from three or was just generally uninvolved, but for the most part what he did here should shine through in a lot of situations.
La semaine dernière pour Kevin Brown, 25 ans, il était coéquipier, ça c'est beau.
For D'Souza. Pass in to Lewis, bounce behind the back.
He's also capable of attacking a closeout or shifted defense and getting to the rim. Now he's not the most natural self-creator by any means, and we'll touch on more of that later, but if a team was in rotation or he caught it on the move and could see a crease, he showed he can at least get there, weaving his way through the lane and at times finishing above the rim, and he also had flashes of being able to curl a pin down and take a couple dribbles to get to the rack as well. But in transition, his ability to run lanes on the wing or on occasion take the ball off the glass and get it up the floor was impressive and one of his easiest areas for offense. Now the second part of that he hasn't done nearly as much, so I want to be clear about that, but it has included some of his most intriguing moments as a player, often using the behind the back and just moving well in transition and converting at a good clip. Big picture, he isn't the most versatile or attention-drawing scorer, but he has the tools to be an effective off-ball, a complementary piece if he can make progress and continue to attract more attention as a shooter to open all of this up as much as possible.
Ils sont pas compris avec Intellect, ça fait un ballon gagné pour la JL Bourg. Le ballon de transition pour Zaccharie Risacher qui va finir.
Ballon perdu par Corneli. Oh, aïe aïe aïe, attention.
Derrière pour lui parler.
Il n'est pas à l'abri. Et le ballon volé par Zaccharie Risacher, est-ce qu'il va y aller tout seul? L'Eurostep, il finit! Main droite!
The Calcus gone. Nearly off the glass is Risacher. All the way to the hoop and throws it down.
Bien secret Monaco. Jordan Lloyd raté. Et le rebond de Zaccharie Risacher. Oh là 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 là!
For the three over the top of Benitez. Now Risacher can get athletically and skillfully down the.
While it wasn't always things that would lead a highlight package or you'd call elite, I was increasingly impressed with several parts of Risacher's defense, and this is probably the area he has the most upside in. He's a solid lateral mover at 6'9" and has been asked to match up with a few positions, including more traditional guards at the point of attack. It's been a test for him, but he's held his own in a lot of ways, bringing consistent effort, flipping his hips, and recovering well to the ball. And while he doesn't have like a +5 wingspan, his presence was definitely felt by many that he matched up with. And I think he's flexible enough to navigate screens as well, which is a pretty big task at that size. Now, I don't see him being a wing stopper or someone you're asking to shut down opposing #1 options, but he should be impactful on the perimeter, matching up with wings and adding some versatility to lineups, and this could be one of the biggest ways he makes an impact early on.
Projectiles capitalize on it. Woman pass Risacher who catches it.
Les capitalisent pas. Corée.
Et là aussi. Le temps mort de.
On lui a dit à la mi-temps, c'est son portable.
Exactement. Le contre de Zaccharie Risacher.
Salas has 11 points, a steal and that big block. Fourth best three-point percentage of all teams in the competition. Just over 39% combine that with
Checker rebond récupéré par Taoul. Regardez. Et la faute.
Now, off the ball, he was pretty attentive and had good feel for his responsibilities and help, especially as the low man. He switched regularly, he had sequences of defending multiple actions in a given possession, he provided some gap help or nail help, and was okay on rotations, though I think he can still get better there. Now, he isn't much of an event creator, and while that definitely matters to get into passing lanes or provide some help side rim protection at his size, he was at least capable of making a play, he didn't make a ton of mistakes, and he has the awareness and effort that should make him a positive team defender. Overall, he has some things he'll need to clean up on this end, and we'll touch on some of those specifics later, but for the most part, he got the job done as an 18, 19-year-old in a tough league and probably deserves a little more credit for it than he's received. And there's a lot of reason to have confidence in him being a plus guy here, even if he doesn't end up being great or elite.
Ce match est en train de se lancer enfin.
Oui. Là, c'est sûr, c'est qu'il manque pas de confiance à la JL Bourg. Oula, un peu de trop bas cette passe.
The biggest question in Risacher's game is his ability to create in any significant way, and especially when we start talking about him as one of the first names called on draft night. Right now, he's not much of a threat with the ball in any half-court setting, he doesn't have much to his handle, and it's generally been tougher for him to create an advantage using his physicality, his speed, or a change of direction, and it led to a lot of rough possessions and attempts at the rim where he just wasn't a very good finisher in the half-court. He also really struggles with handling ball pressure and smaller defenders, often losing the ball, and in addition to all that, his lack of assertiveness made him somewhat susceptible to being basically silent on offense in any given game.
Zaccharie Risacher essaie de se mettre en rythme. Attention, Bryce Brown qui va le prendre. Mike pour Risacher. Il a tous les ballons. Zaccharie Risacher. Il va ressortir, il va le perdre. Oh, il y aura un... Cette semaine, manque de régularité, mais en effet, il est capable de grosses séries.
They're temporary base in Riga. They're only 3 and 6 on the road. That's how big a difference it makes.
Now on the positive side of things, I really do like him as a mover. He's not the most explosive or the strongest, but his fluidity and his stride length really stand out. And if you can get him to be more confident with the ball and making decisions on the fly, I think it could lead to some decent second side success, maybe more of that step back and an eventual 1 or 2 dribble pull up, even if he's never breaking people down or has a great late clock option. Now he's still got a long ways to go before we get there, if we ever do, but the possibility that he can give you something when ran off the line is there in some capacity long term. And I'd imagine if you're in on him being a top 2 guy, you almost have to believe in this coming to fruition more.
Zaccharie Risacher face à Juan Bégarin. Risacher à 3 points.
The other and maybe more important piece to Risacher's creation is his ability to make decisions on the fly and find teammates as a playmaker. Things became increasingly more difficult for him when he had to read defenses off of his own attention, and as he made more dribbles, his comfort level waned, often leading to predetermined and forced passes to just get the ball out of his hands. Sure, you could say that he's in a limited or off-ball role, but unless you're putting a ton of stock into some of his junior club games or a couple FIBA flashes, I mean, he's kind of always been projected as that guy. Now he is actually pretty good at moving the ball and making the extra pass. He makes fairly quick decisions, and you're not going to have an issue with the ball sticking or him choosing himself unnecessarily. And in addition to that, there were some flashes in the open court that really stood out among a few other situations. So he's not completely incapable, but he is going to need to make a concerted effort and learn from his mistakes here early. Otherwise, he's limited in a way that's hard to deliver high value unless he's just an electric shooter. And even then, he'd still be at a disadvantage and schemed against in a lot of ways.
Who comes up with it, what game he's been having, end to end, swings it inside to Kukila. He's really trying to get a piece of it.
Risacher, il va la mettre en l'air pour Godwin.
Oh là, on est déjà sur le parc.
And finishing it up, there were a few other things I think he can improve on that I wanted to touch on. The first is a bit of a theme here, but just continuing to get stronger to handle defending more physical wings or even guards in the NBA will be important. There were times he'd be in position, but just thrown out of place on a drive or taken advantage of on a mismatch, but a lot of that should happen naturally over his first few years, so I'm not super concerned about that. He can also clean up some of the footwork in space and on closeouts, as he had a tendency to give up an advantage unnecessarily at times. And then the biggest thing for me is just him becoming sharper in his communication and making the right plays on rotations instead of just kind of finding his way to a spot at times. Now, there was a lot of good here. He's already a great tagger and doesn't make a ton of mistakes, but some of those other moments you could see him sort of thinking through things or being late to arrive, and he probably would have been taken advantage of more frequently at the NBA level. Overall, he's in a good spot, but to maximize on this end, he'll need to keep working here.
Alpha Diallo. James, il est passé face à Risacher. Il fixe.
Backdoor cut, Matthews onto Conan, who was stripped.
Jordan Lloyd, Dontaol.
Back within 2. Plenty of useful.
Oh, what a fake!
Zaccharie Risacher is someone that has a pretty clear and projectable role offensively. Now, that's not to say that he doesn't have the opportunity to do more or look different than he did this year, but an off-ball scoring and shooting threat is likely who he's going to be at his core. Now, defensively, I actually think it's a little more interesting because he had those point of attack duties, but he'll likely primarily check wings, and while I'm not sure he's shutting stars down, I think he'll be able to take on the top 2 option and be a positive presence as a team defender. For him to hit higher levels of impact, he's going to need to maximize as a shooter first, and that should probably be the focus, and then it's the creation. So ceiling wise, I say high level starter, top 60-100 range, maybe a little bit better than that. And at his floor, I've actually grown a little more confident he finds a rotation spot, even if it's relatively small. He's getting looks as high as the #1 pick. I don't think I'll get there, but I'd be surprised if he got outside the top 7. I think Portland is my favorite landing spot, but San Antonio, Detroit, and just from a fit perspective, I think Washington works too. Comparison wise, I like Keegan Murray for him as a shooter first who moves well, is solid defensively on the wing, and serves as a great complement to a team with creators in place. Now Keegan was far more polished and mature coming in. I mean, he was like 3 years older, but I would expect Risacher's game to resemble something like what he's done in the first couple years of his career. And I'd also throw out a Trey Murphy or a Cam Johnson as potential references as well. While Zaccharie Risacher has real flaws that are worth weighing heavily, especially in conversations at the top of the draft, his skill set as a potential 3-and-D wing with good size and agility gives him a great chance of contributing in a lot of places. He's been about as productive as any non-Wemby 18-year-old this Pro A league has had, and he's playing great basketball in the biggest games of his career, and in a class with a lot of uncertainty, he'll be a tough option to turn down fairly early on draft night.